My name is Cappuccino, in real life, Sebastian Mondial. A little bit about me. I'm a freelance data journalist, research specialist, and trainer. I try to teach other journalists more about data and security, but as you know, there's only so much you can do. I have a complex job history, moving between journalism and IT. If you follow my resume, there are a few gaps and a few unresolved things with like starting to studies but not finishing them. And I'm a dyslexic, so there will be spelling mistakes on the slides. They're not disrespectful of you, but I'd like to keep control to myself and not let others read the stuff I present because it kind of makes me nervous. I'm not an ICIJ member. The ICIJ is a kind of organization where they ask you to be a member and you can't on your own say you want to be a member. I speak on my own behalf. I don't have a non-disclosure agreement or any kind of secrets or any kind of prohibition to talk about anything. So you can ask me anything you like, and as far as I know, you get an honest answer. Or if it is something like, who's the source of the data, then I would say, I can't tell you. But most of the time, I will tell you just plain what I know. Any reference I will give you, you should cross-check, because my memory is bad as yours, or good as yours. And apart from spelling, I might just make mistakes. I find it important to talk about money. So how did I get money for this investigation? I've been paid by the ICIJ to investigate the information on the hard drive in 2012. I've been paid by the NDR, so your taxes, or whatever you call it, you pay, and by the Süddeutsche Zeitung to help them understand and investigate the data. That was a complicated situation because I had to make them pay me, which is kind of catch-22. If they wouldn't have paid me, they couldn't have analyzed the data, but I didn't want to make them pay me in terms of having them access the data, but you know, that happens. I have some affiliations, and currently I'm living on my own funds, so this might change in the next few weeks, but nobody really has me on its payroll, so I can speak really freely and piss everybody off. Or not. So where did I start? Well, in the beginning, in 1788. Just to tell you how these offshore islands claim that their rights cease to be, there is this 10 ships are traveling around an offshore island. There are some kind of royal people on it, and they get helped by the people on the island, and because of that, like here, King George is very grateful and gives them kind of tax omission, and they keep this until the very day. Now, King George is dead, and I seriously ask myself, is this really a reason for offshore tax reduction? Well, it isn't. Because I suck at explaining things around offshore, I will talk more about the investigation technology here. I treat you with a 3-minute, very relaxing, non-flashy video which shows what offshore is about.
This is the story about the tricks used by those in the know to hide assets and skirt the rules. Half of all global trade passes through offshore tax havens, and an estimated 1/3 of the world's wealth resides there. Many people use the offshore world for legal tax shelters or to smooth the way for international trade. But tax havens cost all of us. Without offshore tax havens, the Enron scandal wouldn't have been possible, or the massive fraud pulled off by Bernie Madoff, or the Greek debt crisis. So if you want to avoid paying taxes, or launder money, or create a front company to conceal your activities, or hide your assets from the government, or your wife, or keep your property and investments secret, or open a bank account in another name, making it almost impossible for anyone to trace it back to you, you can easily set up a secret company using one of hundreds of offshore agents. Let's look at the British Virgin Islands, home to 500,000 offshore companies. That's about 40% of the offshore companies on the planet. You can buy a ready-made shelf company or create your own secret company from scratch in about 3 days for just over $1,000. You may be asked to produce documents to establish your identity, and they might check your name in a database to see if you're a terrorist. But don't worry, while the system may catch the big fish, it still lets scores of fraudsters and criminals slip through the net. For another $500 or so, you can hire a third person, or even a shell company, to be the nominee director of your offshore entity. These nominees rent their names so you, the real owner of the company, don't have to disclose yours. It's like registering your car in a stranger's name. Total anonymity. That same person can be a nominee director of hundreds, even thousands of companies around the world. The best part? The nominee doesn't get involved in your company at all. One Panama firm promises that their nominees will be completely ignorant to the happenings of your corporation. They sign a power of attorney and hand control of the company to you. But your name never appears on the corporate documents. Now your offshore agent can open a bank account in your company's name, making it very hard for anybody to trace the money back to you. You could create an asset protection trust in the Cook Islands of the South Pacific, a place notorious for its secrecy. Then you could park your secret company and bank account into the trust. Even if someone finds you, your creditors will have a hard time trying to untangle it all because the Cook Islands doesn't recognize foreign judgments. Oh, and it's a crime in the Cook Islands to disclose any information about an offshore trust. So you can see how offshore tax havens allow you to play outside the rules and cloak your activities and identity in complete secrecy. And it's all perfectly legal, as long as you declare it.
Quite relaxing. So I put this in front because there have been always questions like, is this offshore stuff really so big or not? In terms of global influence, it is big. In terms of what happened here in Germany, I'll come to that later, it's not that big. At least it's not that big as it was made in the media. But how did it all start? It started with a journalist called Jared Ryle. He was writing about an ongoing scandal in the mid-2000s, in the late 2000s, in Australia, very far away. This involves a company called Firepower, who had something like a perpetual motion machine in terms of chemical ingredient that would reduce fuel consumption and totally reduce exhausts like CO2. Now, every smart person in the room would think like, isn't that impossible with a small white powder? Yes, but you don't believe how many people fell for it. If you want to invest $12, this book is like that on various ebook stores. It's actually a quite good read because it's funny how people get entangled in this. This is how Gerard looks like, and this is his desk during the investigation. You see a lot of paper and a computer, but he's not the tech-savvy person. He's more like the chew gum person who walks around and asks questions and asks questions and asks questions and kind of finds out. So, because he's doing this and he gets sued and he wins the lawsuits and he kind of brings Firepower down with a couple of other people in the Sydney Morning Herald, he kind of gets a call from the source. Because between 2007 and 2010, the contents of two servers of two companies, Portcullis Trustnet and Commonwealth, were both offshore enablers, were copied remotely and then put on a hard drive. The person who did this had elevated access to these machines, but I can't tell you more. But, you know, putting data in the cloud is not a brilliant idea. So I was working on the data for a long time, and I can say the work was intentional, but was not work towards a disclosure to journalists. As we know, some governments have the data, so you can actually think of a Moore style like Mr. Kieber, who was the first to submit some data for Germany for the tax authorities. So, Ryle gets the hard drive, in 2010, 260 bytes raw as data, and he kind of doesn't know what to do with it. So what happened is he went with a six-pack to the system administrator of the City Morning Herald, as he told us. And the system administrator had the first more competent glance on it, said, holy shit, this is real stuff. But you're gonna need more to investigate this, and you need kind of tools or whatever to get into this. Only Ryle could verify by his findings around firepower that this data was valid, that it was not a forgery or some kind of random copied shit. So through various ways, he became the director of the ICIJ, which is in Washington. So he had to move from beautiful Australia to stressful Washington. And he was unable to run this project. So the next thing that happens that led to this investigation was the Global Investigation Journalism Conference in Kiev, Ukraine. They had a talk there, a meeting of members to talk about the investigation. I was at the conference but didn't meet them. I go to these conferences to show journalists what kind of security problems they have, and I show them like crowdsourcing versus stuff. I'm not really proficient in that stuff, but I can actually kind of transfer knowledge from more intelligent people to journalists, which are not less intelligent, but not more into technology. But, well, the ICIJ members were kind of notified that this investigation is going on. The two members here in Germany, Mr. Maskolo and Leindecker, were called. They didn't reply at that point. And I was at the second conference for data journalists in the United States, and really lucky coincidence, they called me and asked me if I would be around Washington, and I said, well, one time in a year I'm in the US, so yes, I'm around Washington, and this is where I met the people of the ICIJ. For me, this was like adventure mode. I worked before for the German news agency for 3.5 years in doing statistics. Very good statistics, but like, you know, I move data from left to right and from right to left because they can't hurt me. And I don't like to ask people questions or do any kind of the invading journalism stuff. I'm more into data. But it kind of works out. Word got around that I know how to move data. So I got there. They talked to me. I even disclosed them that I'm kind of half broken. I have post-traumatic stress disorder and fatigue depression, still in therapy. But they say, it's all right, we'll be fine. And after 50 minutes, they put a hard disk in front of me, said, we have some interesting data for you. This is the first time I learned about this. And I kind of, okay, I connected to my computer, I started emulation of Windows, and I really got the job by pressing Shift. Because what they have there was lots of files and some Access databases. And these Access databases, I show you later, have a mode that is kind of program application mode, but if you press Shift and start up an Access database which has an application mode, it starts in the developer mode, and you see all the tables and stuff. And I did this because, well, in the 90s I worked with Access databases, but I'm not really proficient or anything, but this was kind of the thing that I thought like, oh my God, he knows his shit, which I didn't. I mean, I know some stuff, but this is seriously, sometimes these random things can be so important you don't imagine. So overnight, I cloned the hard drive. In the morning, I forgot the password. This was the first stress test for me. I had to tell them, well, I can't travel with the data because I already forgot the fucking password. Their reaction was, oh, well, thank you for taking security so seriously. We have another hard drive. So they let me be on the project still for being kind of, And then we meet again. 6 people meet in Washington under interesting circumstances. Nikki Hager, who has been a great journalist discovering Echelon a couple of 10 years ago. David Lee, who has been with the investigation of WikiLeaks and other things. Jared Ryle, as you know. Marina Walker, who's the deputy of ICIJ. Stefan Kandera, if you have anything about Eastern Europe, Romania, he's a guy. And Mike Hudson, who is a good investigative US-based journalist. And myself. I'm kind of the oddball in this mixture because I don't have an investigative real history or whatever, but I try to cope up. We have 3 days to discuss the operation. We have some guys there who give us some information on tax evasion, and we meet each other in person, which is so important for journalists to trust each other and to get a feeling. So what can I contribute? Well, I know a little bit about security and disaster, as in failure. So I was the master of disaster, as I say, because I challenged them, what can all go wrong? Apart from losing the data, screwing totally up, dying, what can we actually do wrong? Because that's the kind of thing that journalists usually don't think about. They think about getting from A to B, but not on the things that can actually break the way to your destination. And I do that a lot because I screwed up a lot in the past 20 years. Never really bad, but always in a way that I learned something, and I try to get that now done before I screw up, so to reduce problems. Well, we talked about security. At that point, we had the security model that was like, we have a PGP-enabled mailing list, but we shared only one key, and as you know, that's kind of, Also, half of the people didn't know how to use PGP, so they mailed plain text, asked for the key, did other random stuff where you would like, yeah, let's just send it plain text. But we kind of managed to do something different. It's not like they didn't try to. It's not like they're too stupid, but it was too much at the very same time to learn for all of us. And here's the other things that happened. David Lee said, we're doing 30 stories, no more, because he already looked in the data and said there are 100 of stories. And that's something kind of striking for me, because I'm like, why stop? And he said, attention. Because the reader of The Guardian in the UK want to read 30 stories, but no more. You can do it for a week. We did it for a week. But after that, it gets fat. I mean, look at the news cycle, and you see, at some point, you can't really hear about the Greece financial problems anymore because you heard so much. So we planned the next meeting in the UK. We set an estimate release date, October 2012. Oh, we're so foolish. We thought that would be plenty of time. Wasn't. And we're setting goals. Mine was find a German media partner and work on the zip files. So just a short thing about zip files. I got an interesting cryptographic problem still not unsolved. We have a large archive split in 100 parts. 2 parts from the last third are missing. It's not the last part, which is kind of good because there's kind of the dictionary in it, but we can't decompress it. We tried it with everything on the market, which is buy for legal money and not kind of fishy or kind of looks like government, but it didn't work. We have some serious data in there we couldn't extract, so if you have any kind of idea how to do this beyond using the original zip repair function in the command line of Unix or something like that, we all tried that, please call me. That would be awesome. You get a kind of medal or something for that. But apart from that, we got some serious help with all the investigation, and that's kind of core thing I want to show you because it's actually even more relevant than I could have imagined when I submitted this talk, because we got a forensic tool, which I have to fire up, just a second. And because I can't really show you the original data for security reasons, I don't carry that around. I took the liberty of downloading some interesting data which is still available on the internet. It's called the HB Gary leaked emails. That's a security company that fails really big. So if you want to play with this for yourself, there's a torrent on Pirate Bay. It's of course illegal to have that stuff, and I as a journalist can't have it, so I will delete it after showing you, whatever. But this is a kind of bunch of information that's very similar to what we have on the hard drive and more. So let me see where I can get up this software. Here we are. Yeah, Java my ass. Okay, so Nuix is a forensic analysis tool, and It's an offline forensic analysis tool, but this does so much, as you heard of the last few days, what can we do online. Because what it does, it takes all the information, in this part, all the emails, and extracts all the metadata, all the linked data, all the structural information, and makes it searchable. And for my simple mind, I imagine Tempora and the other government stuff we hear about, something like this, but in a bigger and more web-like. So you see here, Aaron, Phil's, and Ted's emails are in this database right now. They have been indexed in various ways, and I look for the nice three-letter NSA. So now I get results. And this is actually Apache Lucene running in the background. So they use in this expensive software some kind of open Apache whatever source technology. But they mix it up with lots of stuff that's their own stuff in kind of secret whatever. But it does interesting things. It helps not only find you things, but it shows you how documents are related. It shows you all the metadata you usually have to fish through. You can see, like, if there's a very hidden sheet in an Excel file or something like that, every kind of thing you want to search for as a journalist, you can actually type in the search bar, like, show me every encrypted stuff, show me any kind of skin tone image. That's also fun. Let's see. Where is it? Named entities. I think it's here. They have all this stuff because this software is bought by the police. It's even used here in Germany. When they get hard drives seized from you because you kind of violate copyright or did child porn or something awful or something not awful, whatever, when they get your hard drive, they run it through this system and they can see directly into your information. And the thing is, this result list is kind of unspectacular, but it gets interesting because this does real-time network analysis. So now you see, this is a kind of cloud of people who communicated about the three-letter word NSA. And I can kind of shrink it because I want to get out the infrequent talks. Now we can see Aaron is talking with a couple of people about this topic. And this happens instantly. So people who are capable of getting your hard drive because of legal reasons can put this in the software. They can type in anything you write, in your private thoughts, any kind of thing you talked about, and then can see who communicated about what. They can kind of search for documents. They can follow it up. And after they discover the network, they go to the event map, and then they can plot a timeline, who was talking to whom, from what time to what time. So this is the type of e-discovery software that's absolutely awesome in terms of, we couldn't have done the investigation with that, but it's absolutely problematic if you think about implications, who can have this stuff and what they are doing with it, with this type of technology, not with this very software because it's kind of offline. But imagine this stuff online and for more data, and then you get what this is all about. But what I wanted to show you is how we basically worked. We would put in some interesting topics. My topics would always be like problems. And then we get a new event map, a new network. So who's talking to whom about problems? Let's reduce the count again. And then when you find the major people involved in talking about the problems, you kind of follow them and follow the topics they're talking, and you kind of see parts of the stuff you have. To put it into perspective, the 260 gigabyte we had took about 16 hours on a very strong machine with SSDs, RAID 0, blah, 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 to get indexed. But after that, it's just like, and you can just, it shows you everything. It has nice regular expressions for finding company names, countries, credit cards. You see that on this side, money, URLs, IP addresses. So you scan through that all, and you can actually dock it via Python to other kind of software. And so this is kind of, okay, we have this much data, but we have this specific software which was given us by Nukes for free, and we can sift through it. So this helps. Any questions so far? Good. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. and fastly move on. That wasn't a question, was it? Okay. Good. So, show stuff that I did. So first problem was that journalists are usually don't prepared for this kind of tech stuff. So my main work in that area wasn't really discovery, but setting up computers and kind of indexing that stuff. And actually, it saves a lot when you buy expensive hardware. That's the zip drive. Yeah, I did some other stuff with it, and I just mentioned it. Destructive analysis with a tool called Big Mean Folder Machine. It sorts all the kind of files on a Mac into kind of the extensions, which is kind of stupid if you think about it, but clever if you just want to see how many extensions you are and what kind of specific file types you have. We broke some Outlook files apart. We had some files which weren't able to identify, but this nice Unix file tool is really helpful with that. And we found some interesting PowerPoints with that, which were presentations about how to do offshore. So then there's Duncan Campbell, which I have to thank every time I do a presentation or talk about this, because he's a senior investigative specialist in UK, and he's one of the guys who actually knows really deeply his stuff. And he helped us very much in kind of preserving the evidence, because we were actually, until that point, working destructively of some stuff. Like, we didn't have write blockers. We didn't have kind of perfect copies, like real forensic images, but he stopped us and said, freeze, make it forensic sound, make it proof for court, and then, you know. So, then again, is this fake? Is this a setup? If you have so much data, this question gets always asked. I tried to apply Benford's law to some of the numbers we had in there. If you don't know Benford's law, look it up on Wikipedia or some statistic manual. It's a law of the distribution of numbers. If you have fabricated numbers, they usually don't match the distribution that Benford says for natural numbers, which is awesome, because that's kind of thing that the tax authorities use to detect if companies are kind of manufacturing their accounting stuff. Because usually if people kind of start making up numbers, they are not that creative. They round too much and they use some numbers more strongly than others. So they don't apply Benford, and Benford makes them kind of stick out. The IRS is very successful in doing this. We have an next sprint. And we have a mystery archive, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, because that's always the test to find out if somebody is knowledgeable. Wait a second. I'm going to show you that in a moment. Does anybody know what this is? Have anybody seen this kind of file structure? This is really interesting because that happened to strike me in the night last year. I was working in the 90s to get some money for the University of Dortmund in the physics department, and they had me set up a Windows NT server. Not some random IT server, but an NT351 server. This one came with an extra disk of a mail system, which Microsoft bought before bringing out Exchange, which was called Microsoft Mail for PC Networks. It was only on the market for 9 months. Before that, they didn't have some mail software. After that, they had this Exchange stuff. And this is the file system of this very software. And the fun thing is, this isn't indexed by Nuix, so it wasn't detected. Nuix shows the files, but says, well, I don't know what this is. If you look in a file monitor, there's nothing. There's just binary blah. And you kind of think, okay, from the structure, whatever it is, it might be important. So at the end of it, I make it short. I set up a Windows NT server, and getting there was hard because getting a vintage copy which isn't cracked or virus infected and has this companion CD is kind of hard. And then setting up on a virtual machine is also hard because they kind of, yeah, we have all this modern stuff, old stuff doesn't run here, so you kind of, what am I supposed to do? Buy old hardware and set it up? Nope. There we are. Yeah. That was a more complicated password. So I hope the mouse runs. So at the end of it, you end with this interface, and actually that was the hardest part. I got so close, and then I didn't have the password. Removing of the password was most difficultly, and I solved it by actually finding a shareware to repair this archives on a mirror of old GeoCities web stuff. And then this was shareware, so I had to find a crack, which I found on a water site, because the alpha couldn't be reached. But I could remove the actually the password. And then we have suddenly 40,000 more emails, which is awesome because this is old stuff, as you can see by the dates. They kind of kept the server running until 2001. And because this stuff was only kind of sold for 9 months, we had a really window of opportunity there. And since I kept the backup on this hard drive or server, we get kind of an extra. And as you can see, let's see, public holiday. There's some boring stuff in there that's not really interesting, but I can show it because it's not illegal to show that boring stuff. Anyway, but this was exciting because this is the moment where you kind of work like 4 weeks to get that stuff, but when you get it done, you're like, I'm worth something. So let me shut it down. Okay. Back to the presentation. So, show stuff. I skip over that and go to the work of the media companies. I had to find a German media partner, and that is kind of complicated if you don't know how to do this or do this the first time. There were 2 members of the ICJ could ask. One was the boss of the investigative magazine, but I was too scared to ask him because I heard numerous things that he's not really friendly with this other boss in the online department. I'm talking about Der Spiegel. And that was a kind of situation that would kind of make it difficult because I have a kind of hopefully no assholes at work policy, but that could be prone to bring all kinds of problems. Not that they are assholes, but they might bring in some. And the other one, that was the guy who's a little bit older and always said he works with binders, he works with paper. And I was kind of, okay, he goes there and says, please print me the hard drive. And at some point, somebody of his team said that. But I trusted him, and we set up 2 teams after getting things done. And so, NDR and Süddeutsche Zeitung decided to investigate that stuff. I couldn't tell them if there was any kind of good thing for Germany there, but you know, they have to take chances. So they set up real secure rooms, encrypted drives, everything, and we split the people on the hard drive, which we thought they were from Germany, into 3 classes, and also in terms of locations, north, south, and tested them for any kind of fishy things we would find. So we threw about 10,000 names at these tools. You can kind of batch do that. So we did take all the politicians and their relatives and all the media people and their lawyers, and we throw it against it, and we kind of find more and more. And then we classify them in interesting, well, only if we must. But everybody got investigated, and because of the media law in Germany, which has these definitions of Person der Zeitgeschichte und relative Person der Zeitgeschichte, you only can report about these 2 types of people. And your nice dentist next to your house, even if he or she is in the offshore files, won't be reported on by us because he doesn't qualify at that. And we don't give the data to the tax authorities. We knew they already had it, but this is why we only report about few. So we did a month-long investigation. That was in November. And then The Guardian came out with an early publication because they kind of said, well, we do it the way nobody notices. And this actually worked. If you look at the backlog of The Guardian, they reported about all that stuff without naming the companies or revealing that they had the hard drive, which is awesome. because we thought like, holy shit, everybody will find out. Nobody found out. I dropped out of this project for a while. I had a myocarditis, and the ICIJ started using Dropbox and sent the hard drive to the Amazon cloud. And I was like, nope, because that was the end of my security model, which was I set up a secure forum for them instead of the PGP mailing list, which was in a very unsuspicious server, which looked like something from gardening tools. And in this forum, instead of email and getting kind of filtered, everybody went there, looked at the website, exchanged stuff there, and put documents and threads and what you do in the forum. And then we said we kind of delete the forum completely 3 days into publication, because once we publish, everybody wants to have any kind of information they get. This part worked. The other part, well, as far as we know about Dropboxes and clouds, the data is in whoever hands who can kind of subpoena or get that stuff. It's not that this is really dangerous data, but it's the privacy model that's kind of something that wasn't really for me. So, and I don't hold a grudge against ICIJ, but that's not my way of work. In 2013, the investigation continues. I started to something completely different, which is training. Then there's the conference again. I should have been in the US while the publication was, but they delayed it further, so I was back. And at the end of it, some stories didn't make it to the finishing line, but we had some like 80 journalists in 40 countries completely exchanging all their material, which has never been done before in that scale, and they kept their mouth shut, which has never been done before. That was really awesome. It makes kind of think that journalism is not so bad as you kind of perceive it if you look at all the failures that happened over time. On the 4th of April, the embargo ends, and then we have the perfect storm, which is kind of thing I want to emphasize because the media attention for offshore leaks was, let's say, 200% more than it should have been, or that would be normal, but nothing was happening. That was after the Cyprus disaster, but before the Boston bombings or anything. Margaret Thatcher died. The only thing that actually happened was that 2 balls of the lottery got stuck in the machine, and that was the headline of the Bild Zeitung. But everybody else reported on offshore leaks. And I worked 2 days only on the phone and on TV and on radio and explaining to other journalists why this is interesting. They asked, so I got them the information. And what was even more fun, we reported about Gunter Sachs, which is now cleared of any wrongdoings in terms of that he has legally done nothing wrong in the period that he can be held accountable. There's this kind of, how you call that? After some couple of years, if you did something wrong on taxes, it comes null and void. Know the term? I don't know. But anyway, but we did a story on him because he had a vast network. And that's kind of the strange thing when you look at it. Just a second. Here it is. That's his network that we found. And when you see this network in all the data and you delete all the contracts and leave all the emails, that makes you kind of wonder what he was up to. And so for the last years, he paid all his taxes. At least the tax authorities say his name is clear. But what he has been doing in the 80s, 90s, whatever, that's not of their concern anymore because that's off the timing. So to make that clear, he's innocent, but he had a network where you can see how this tech stuff can get so confusing that usually without this information, you won't figure anything out about these people. What happened? 10% increase in bought newspapers. This is big for the Deutsche Zeitung. 7 title stories, 4 double pages, and 10 articles. The NDR gets 10 different radio items, lots of repeats and rebroadcasts. And the other media companies went batshit crazy. I don't know. So, rest of the month, meta. Nice, critical questions, and people write about it. Or do something related. Not so nice, ask critical or suggestive questions and let the crazies rule the comments and blogs. Welcome to the, what do you call that, speculation zone, the thing where you as a journalist can kind of get confused because the people writing that you usually treat as colleagues, but when they ask questions in a way you can't answer them, you're kind of, what should I do? What should I do? I don't hold a grudge against anyone personally, but usually proper procedure would be you come to me, ask me a question, I give you an answer, you publish that. Posting just questions and not submitting them to anybody is kind of not helping because here's the real word, it just fuels conspiracy theories because it looks like nobody can answer these questions. But there are not any kind of question I couldn't answer except who's the source of the data. But well. So later, US, Australia, and UK say they have the data. That wasn't a surprise. Everybody gets a glimpse. Germany will have the data soon. And conference and talks are on the rise, and I submit that stuff here. And then ICAJ did something surprisingly, which I didn't anticipate, or we didn't anticipate. They said, okay, everybody's kind of, they're kind of questioning why you just publish that and didn't publish this. So they publish it all. And that was a big discussion again. Let me see that. Where I have it? Nope. Nope. Yes. So now there's an online database where you can put in any kind of name, like Mr. Sucks, and then see all the databases we have in a nice format. You can actually download all the names in the companies as a CSV file. And they have a format for Gephi if you want to do real large scale visualizations. But once you click on that stuff, you see all the networked companies again. So this is kind of really great work by La Nación, the programmers there, to make it accessible. And it's kind of crowdsourced method that we say, okay, if you see your neighbor there and you kind of think that he's suspicious, then maybe tell us. No, not your neighbor, maybe a politician. Neighbors are not interesting, only if your neighbor is a politician. But anyway, this is kind of helping. But we're here in Germany, the medias, myself, we're still kind of critical because there are people in here there we even don't know that they were in there because somebody took their identity and put it in the place of these people as draw persons. Because you can just do that in these offshore stuff. And so from German media law, that would be kind of, not really. Okay, short version. Leaks will happen. They'll be more and more digital. And that's the kind of thing that journalists are scared of because you need more skills and you will have to find a way to cope. You will need expertise and equipment. You need that better before. In terms of prepare before, but nobody was really prepared. This is why we took a year, more than a year, to run this investigation. With all the experience a couple of people have, they can do it now in 3 months or less. And this is the time you actually need to figure out all the people in the database if they're kind of suspicious or not. You have to leave your comfort zone of pre-configured system to go ahead. That's the kind of thing that journalism is kind of prone to, that standard configured PCs make journalists not try out software or any kind of work on their own. I mean, I had a discussion outside why PGP is so less used in journalists. Well, because it doesn't really run with the Outlook version that's currently on the disk, or Domino or Lotus or whatever they have, and because installing it can only be done by the IT, and you have to trust an IT person to install your key and stuff. The whole. Journalists don't plan for failure. But they have to. They have to exchange more information, and they have to be agile, and trust, and open, and meeting more personally. That's something I learned from this investigation, and I started to believe in, that you actually can meet people, you can work together in life more than one time, and trust completely. And also, what we failed to do, plan for success. Everybody in the teams here in Germany, 10 people, were not prepared for this kind of media storm, and we're kind of, what should we do? What should we say? I said a few things online, and if you follow around the strange discussions on this blog, that would considered maybe trolling. That wasn't nice of me. So here are the people involved. Julia Stein in der Recherche. If you have any kind of information leaking, go to her. Hans Leindecker, if you have something global, go to Jared Ryle. He's good. And that's my presentation. Now you can ask questions. Thank you so far. No questions? Yes. You wish. But I have good news. If you want to try out what I showed you, there is a tool. Wait a second. Just have to focus the mouse. Actually, this Nuix tool is dongled. So I'm dependent on this USB stick. As long as I have it, it works, and only for a specific time. It costs around 5 figures legally to obtain it. So the donation was very generous. And as a side note, the mother company of Nuix was actually also in the database and did some offshore stuff, which brought us to lockdown mode because for a day we were like, maybe they gave it us to, spy on us. They didn't. Everything was clean. But, that's kind of crazy thing you do. Also, we put everybody's name in the database, by the way. But they have something called Prooffinder, which is $100 software. What you see here, you actually get, but it only works up to 15 gigabytes of information. So with the HB Gary data or the leaks from, what was it, Scientology Austria or something, it works perfectly. The only dumb thing about this $100 software is it works only for a year, and it only works if you don't change the licensing key of the Windows installation. So it's bound to Windows. And you can't actually put it in a virtual machine and move it around. But then again, you have the most sophisticated, or one of the most sophisticated e-discovery tools to play with. Maybe that's worth $100. I don't know. Here's the funny thing. Exactly a year ago, I was here and talking about how journalists need tools for data. I couldn't reveal that I was working on this investigation. So I was kind of desperately fishing for ideas, and I didn't get any, sadly. There are 2 alternative things that we used for kitchen kind of stuff. There's something called DT Search, which actually goes fast through data and has some data detectors and kind of works for a number of files. And there's a tool who does this visualization thing of Nuix that is called Jigsaw. I think on Poodle.org, Friedrich Lindenberg wrote an article about this document discovery things just a day ago or 2. And Jigsaw is a university tool made by John Stasko, and it has actually the kind of minority report display. You can kind of put it on 6 monitors and see all the facets of data. It's even more sophisticated in some displays as Nuix, but expect it to be really bumpy, and you have to really have a good machine for that. But yeah, it's free and good to play around. Yes. The reason I use the Mac is because as a data journalist, I use all 3 operating systems, and you only can get so far in making them all 3 work on a kind of computer or hardware. So I use this computer as a main machine, so I have all the 3 operating systems. Yes, it's a VM, but it blends in, so yes. Okay, 5 minutes left. Yes. You can only do so much one training at a time. There are a couple of good tech-savvy data journalists in Germany, but they are only a few. And they work more like I work who I like to work for, not the other way around, which is kind of a privilege. But you can't really force people to be knowledgeable. Yeah, of course. I mean, sorry, please give me a minute to show you one thing about last year, because I've been showing this slide last year, and wait, here's some play button. Is there? And this slide is about two technologies where just does the thing you've seen in prison. This is called an optical interception by the company Glimmerglass. That's what they're using on the offshore cables, on the subcables. And this is the kind of technology used to make this network detection, which is Tempera all about. And I show this to journalists and say, you have to protect your communications ways. And they say something, but using PGP is making me more kind of suspicious, and encryption and whatever. And I say, yes, it's making you more suspicious and secure. And that's the kind of communication I have every other week. I don't have an answer for this question apart from I think it's absolutely necessary to be more digitally knowledgeable for journalists in general terms, even if they work in the kind of glamour department or whatever. But try to put this into the minds of the employers to kind of finance trainings, or how to make it really necessary in kind of getting a job somewhere. It doesn't happen. I've been at a university for quite some time, and as far as I can see, that's not their priority. I don't know what happens now. Yeah, it would be awesome to have more IT people go into journalism. I mean, I went that way. I've been doing internet security for banks in the 90s. Elsewise, I would be a total noob around this stuff. So I kind of knew about PGP in the 90s, but this is very rare, and I have to admit I didn't use it after the break of the data retention until some weeks ago. So I don't know. Yes, I have. I have a secure Dropbox, which is actually designed after what Zeit Online published. And I have a blog which is defunctional because I have been busy doing other things. But since I'm now on my own funds, I can actually set it up, and that's kind of what's July for. But I hope I can spread it to other journalists, and as I said, maybe I will work more for the NDR, and they will establish the same system. But a couple of other investigative journalists, like from Der Stern and Der Zeit, already have that set up, and I would, as far as I know the design, I would trust them. They're good people. Okay, thank you so much.